Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today is July 6, 2025, and we're going to really get into something pretty fascinating. It's a potentially huge shift in U.S. party politics. Our sources are pointing towards what seems like a pretty dramatic new conflict. We're talking about the apparent rivalry between Donald Trump and Elon Musk. But here's where it gets really interesting. These sources, they're suggesting this might not be, just a simple clash of egos.
Exactly. What we're exploring today is this idea that the opposition we think we see, it might actually be part of something much bigger, a strategic rebalancing maybe of the whole American political landscape. So our mission is to really dissect these claims and figure out what this could actually mean, going forward.
Okay, so to really understand this idea of a staged conflict, a performance, as our sources apparently call it, they point to a specific moment, right? What do they say really kicked this off?
Yeah, the material we've looked at suggests it kicked off right after the Trump tax cut bill passed. That's when Elon Musk launched the America Party. America too, as the source notes it. And what's really fascinating is how these sources think this new party, even if it starts small, could hold, well, immense power. It might become this key player, the deciding vote on policies, essentially saying which way the wind blows. They describe this as a major turning point.
Right, so a kingmaker role, essentially.
Precisely.
Okay, so you see the headlines, the media often shows this clear conflict, Trump versus Musk. But if this party launch is part of something bigger,
Yeah.
what's the core idea from our sources about this rivalry?
Well, the central interpretation we're digging into is that this conflict, it could be, and this is their phrase, merely an act, or maybe a carefully put together performance. The idea is that, despite how it looks, Trump and Musk might actually be heading in the same basic direction, sharing long-term goals. And it's interesting, our sources even point out that the media used to talk about how they cooperated before this whole conflict story took hold.
An act. That's quite something. So if it isn't a real fight, what is the underlying strategy then? What's the big picture, according to these sources?
The analysis we're seeing points towards a strategic rebalancing. Rebanshingo is the term used in the source material of American party politics. And one key thing they mention is the age difference. Trump's over 70, his time frame is limited. Musk, though, he's still young. So the interpretation offered is that Trump might be, let's say, willing to be the bad guy for 4 years, pushing through some really radical reforms, disruptive stuff. And then Musk steps in afterwards to kind of support the growth of a new America, maybe focusing on innovation, tech, that kind of thing, building on whatever reforms Trump made.
So like a strategic handoff, almost generational. That's a really long game they're suggesting. And you mentioned orchestration. Do the sources give any hints about who might be pulling the strings on this? The mastermind, so to speak?
They do, actually. There's speculation in our sources that a figure named Bencento-san, that's how it's written, Bencento-san might be the one behind this whole sophisticated media strategy and political game plan.
Bencento-san, okay. It's quite dramatic. If this Trump-Musk dynamic really does become central, who loses out? Which established group is most impacted, according to these sources?
Well, the sources argue pretty clearly that the Democratic Party would be the most impacted. Seriously impacted. Think about it. If voters who maybe supported Trump before are looking for something else, and the choice they see is between Trump and Musk's America Party, well, they might just shift to Musk, not back to the Democrats.
So it could pull voters away from the Democrats, not just the Republicans.
Exactly. It could really shake the Democratic Party, potentially even push them towards the margins of American politics. You could end up with a new setup, mainly between this America Party and the Republicans.
Wow. That's a huge potential shift. Do the sources mention how the Democrats might even react or what they could do?
They don't really detail specific Democratic countermoves, no, but they definitely imply this deep shaking, as they put it. It suggests that the Democrats would really struggle to, find their place if voters see this Trump-Musk thing as the main event.
Okay, so the domestic impact is obviously huge if this plays out. But what about bigger picture stuff, global implications? Did the sources touch on that at all?
They do, but it gets very speculative here. They talk about connections to the U.S.-China rivalry. Now, they're very clear this is unsubstantiated. Okay, the truth is unknown. They stress that. But they hypothesize about the possibility of, say, election fraud back in 2020, maybe involving an Eastern Bloc country. And they link this to perceptions that the Biden administration, the Democrats, are maybe pro-China. Again, these are perceptions mentioned in the source. So the speculation, and I have to stress that word, is that if all these very big ifs were true, then getting the Democrats out of the picture via this Trump-Musk strategy, well, it could be seen as a great victory for Trump, maybe pushing back against perceived Chinese influence in U.S. politics.
Okay, so very speculative, but potentially massive stakes being discussed in these sources. Looking ahead then, what should we be watching for? What are the key moments coming up?
The sources definitely highlight the next couple of years, 2025, 2026. They say these are incredibly interesting times to watch. The 2026 midterm elections especially are seen as crucial. If this Trump-Musk conflict narrative keeps going, and if the American Party actually gets traction, gains real support, yeah, it could really destabilize the Democrats' position. The sources even suggest a kind of populist outcome. Like, if Trump's reforms are seen as making a mess of things, maybe people just turn to Musk as the obvious next leader, skipping over traditional Democrats entirely.
Right, and 2026, isn't that also when the World Cup is in the U.S.?
It is, yeah. And the sources mention that too. They suggest this huge global event could become like an unprecedented stage for all this political drama, amplifying everything.
The whole world watching, potentially.
That seems to be the implication. It adds this whole other layer, doesn't it, to an already pretty wild political picture.
Okay, so we've really dug into these sources suggesting that what looks like a conflict between Trump and Musk, it might actually be this very carefully planned rebalancing act for U.S. politics, something that could reshape the whole party system, maybe even global dynamics.
Yeah, and I think this whole discussion really underlines how complex political stories can be, doesn't it? How sometimes what's on the surface might be hiding these deeper, longer-term strategies. It really encourages us, I think, to look beyond the headlines and question, what are the real motives? What's the long game here?
So here's a final thought then, something for you to chew on. What if some of the big political fights we follow so closely in the media, what if they are actually these carefully staged long-term plays designed to shift the landscape in ways we're only just starting to figure out? And if that's the case, what does that mean for how you follow the news, how you make sense of the politics, and decide what you believe?